Hello and welcome to the Urbanism Awards celebration. Quick few notes before we begin today's session. We are recording for the Academy of Urbanism's YouTube channel. And just a reminder, please keep your microphones muted if you aren't speaking. Engage with the session, give us your comments and your chat. Tell us what you're thinking in response to the poems and the other presentations as we go through the session. And while we have your attention, here are some upcoming events from the Academy of Urbanism. These are all repeated on the Academy's website, so please visit academyofurbanism.org.uk/events for more information. And a reminder to those of you who aren't members, please consider joining. And I'd like to hand over to the Academy of Urbanism's chair, Tony Reddy. Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. Colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this year's AoU Awards Celebration session. This is a very special session because it's online. But before we engage in the session, I want to, at the outset, thank all of our sponsors. In this year of all years, our sponsors have been such an important part of the Academy, because without them, we couldn't simply have hosted the number of events we've done in what has been an extraordinary year. So we thank all of them for their assistance. I would like to just look at the subject of the Urbanism Awards and its place in the Academy's activity list. The Urbanism Awards are the Academy's primary platform for recognising the best, most enduring and most improved urban environments, which we have visited, assessed, celebrated, as examples of good urbanism across the UK, Ireland and Europe. In the 14 years that the Academy has been producing the Urbanism Awards, we have celebrated 210 great places. However, due to the pandemic, the Academy has not been able to put on its usual major Urban Awards event, which is one of the major features of the Academy's program for the year. However, we decided, while it was not possible to visit the various award categories, we decided this year to review all 15 past finalists, to look at the finalists of the past 14 years and to revisit 15 of our past finalists, which were selected through a selection process among the academicians. We are grateful to them for having provided us with a series of weekly sessions of insightful presentations where we looked at the various categories in some detail, with presentations from each of the categories. This special program has reunited us with representatives from cities, towns, neighbourhoods, streets and places that the AoU has praised as exemplars of good urbanism. And we've heard how these places are continuing to find inspiring ways to face the challenges of today. So today, what better way to draw the Urbanism Awards Revisited program to a conclusion than this afternoon of celebration and reflection. Joined by our lead assessors, we welcome back 15 great places across 5 award categories to share their thoughts and ideas in an open discussion. We're now going to look at a video about the subject.
Taking part in the Urbanism Awards means that you look differently at your own city again, because a lot of projects you have been working on for years and years already, and so the nomination really made us conscious of the fact that, well, we did quite a special thing, and that other people see it.
I think it's always good to be able to test yourself to think about how we're developing as a city, how we compare to other successful cities across the UK, and to use the process as a learning process, as a chance to celebrate how you've done, but also to think about where you're going for the future.
I think meeting the assessors was really exciting because they brought a lot to the journey and the learning, and it was also about bringing the community together. So we brought some of our community partners when the assessors visited Consortia Community Greenway, and it was really nice for them to be part of the process. And being here today is wonderful, being at the Urbanism Awards, as we get to meet other projects across Europe and essentially learn from them. And we really want to build on the success of our project due to that learning.
I'd really recommend being in the process of the Urbanism Awards. It's been great to get back together as a group and redefine what we were doing originally in order to be able to share that with others, which has been a valuable process. And to that context of seeing what others are doing, I think gives you some more confidence in the times when going gets tough, to know that others are taking similar initiatives in similar ways, facing similar problems, achieving similar successes, but having that context is really important.
The Academy of Urbanism presents a fantastic opportunity to really question yourself, and that is something that I think any town on this journey should embrace.
Later this afternoon, our young urbanists will share their thoughts on the future of urbanism in a session called People, Planet, Resilience, the three themes that came as key areas of focus through the discussions we have had with all of the various contestants. Simeon Shitbanayev, a doctoral researcher at Birmingham City University, will now introduce the young urbanist thoughts regarding the future of urbanism. Thank you, Simeon.
Thank you very much, Tony. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited to be part of the Academy of Urbanism Awards, and the Urbanist panel is going to go in depth in the topics a bit later. I just wanted to give you a bit of background about what the young urbanists are, and also about what the event later will entail, so stick around. Together with three more of the young urbanists, Roxana, Sean, and Florian, we will look forward to giving our perspective on the three topics, specifically as future professionals. We really hope to provide different views and just spark a discussion about the challenges that lay ahead of placemakers. Especially in the current environment, I think there's a lot of preconceived notions that are being challenged, and I think as future professionals, we'll have to be dealing with a much more dynamic landscape of ideas, I think, and it'll be very different to what we're probably used to. A bit about the young urbanists. I've been a young urbanist since 2014, since graduating from my bachelor degree. If you're not familiar with the concept, it's a network of students and early career professionals which work in and around the built environment. We all have shared interest in learning from place. The aim of the group is to develop skills and knowledge in the principles, techniques, and processes of good urbanism. And you know, the group has a really incredible energy, and it's been a really, really great way to network with peers, but also with the wider Academy of Urbanism and with the academicians. Pre-COVID, we organized a lot of formal and informal events regularly. There were monthly meetings across the regions, and now most of those have moved quite successfully online. I think earlier you saw that the next Young Urbanist event is on the 10th of December. It's going to be focused on the 15-minute city concept, and there's been quite a few of those events, and I took part in one, and I think you can find all of those onto the YouTube channels. And also the network runs a mentoring scheme which partners young urbanists with academicians, so I would encourage everybody to get involved with that, and also just to support the young urbanists in your locale. I've taken part in a lot of the initiatives which the young urbanists have provided. You know, we regularly support the Congress, you know, running around chaperoning people when it was physical. I don't know how it's going to look in the future, but you know, it was been really good opportunity, and I just wanted to leave you with that in the beginning. If you can't stick around for the panel, Just find the young urbanists in your neck of the woods, ask them for a coffee chat, just engage with the group. It's a really good experience for everybody involved, and I think you won't be disappointed by some of the ideas and the sort of challenges that you might get from young urbanists. But yeah, that's from me, and I think I'll see you in a bit later, around 5, I think.
Thank you, Simeon. We now move to the first of our categories, the Great Place category. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ian Macmillan, our poet in residence. Ian's poems have been a unique feature of the awards events from inception. His witty and insightful sonnets have captured the key features, spirit and genius loci of the many contestants who have participated in previous events. In writing these sonnets, he has left a lasting reference to which the Academy can remember the place, street, neighbourhood, town and European cities which we have visited and examined over the past 14 years. Stephen.
This first poem is City Park, Bradford. I've got to tell you that all these poems feel like they've come from some place a long time ago, some pre-coronavirus. It's almost like reading the Rosetta Stones, I've got to tell you. They're all sonnets because a sonnet is a kind of combination of academic exercise and moment of inspiration. And sometimes the rhyme drives you towards ideas you might never normally get to. So this is City Park, Bradford, where I've splashed many a time, I can tell you. Light here, please, light here. Water and light, and a pool that's a mirror. So look, just look in the summer's glare or the autumn's night, and you can read this place like a book. So take your slow time with Bradford's story. Turn your page like the light seems to turn on this water/glass setting that reflects the glory of the architecture and the light that helps you learn that all cities need a place as lovely as this to stroll and sit down in and take the air. Come here now, Bradford, give us a kiss, and don't tell me you haven't got a thing to wear, because these reflections in water and light stay clear. The future is Bradford's, the future is here. Isn't it strange to read a poem about the future when you're actually sitting in the future and the future was different to what you thought it was going to be? That's not part of the sonnet. That's me extemporizing about what was in the sonnet when I wrote it. The Peace Gardens and the Winter Gardens in Sheffield, some of my favourite settings just to sit and reflect. I love the Peace Gardens. Like those flowers that seem to shoot up overnight, reshaping the landscape, defining the view, these gardens have grown and enfolded the light in places that seem like they shout, "We are new." Let's not forget that this place could have rusted, could have laid down and died, turned to the wall, but instead a proud city's futures entrusted to places that bustle from dawnbreak to nightfall. And places like this are where cities take their time and edge towards a working definition of sublime. I do like that word sublime in a sonnet. It's not only a great word for rhyming with all kinds of things, but also it suggests that the places we're talking about are sublime and will be again once all this is somewhere else. The Viking Triangle, Waterford. Found this quite hard to write just because the rhymes took the time, but that makes them better in some senses. As though lines were etched between the horns on a Viking's helmet, down to his chin guard and right back up again, the shape that's drawn a kind of Viking triangle. The idea is not hard. A memory of the Vikings, a commemoration of city walls, a whole millennium old, that you can stroll by in a peregrination of the sort they might have made. Be bold and pretend you're from the past as you visit Christchurch Cathedral and Reginald's Tower, as history fans out from the Vikings, makes explicit that heritage is a continuum feel the power of remembering, then remembering this, clear as Waterford crystal, triangulating bliss. Bliss is another one of my favourite words. It's like sublime. I found myself using the word bliss and the word sublime quite a lot in these poems. And I kind of went, ha, as I was reading it, because you think, gosh, it is about the future that we couldn't quite imagine, these poems. That's the thing about them. In a few years, we'll write different kinds of poems, I'm sure.
Right, I'd now like to introduce Francis Newton, our lead assessor for the Great Place category. Francis.
Francis, you need to.
Hi, sorry for the delay. Yeah, Tony, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Francis Newton, lead assessor for Great Places, and I'd also like to introduce Rob Thompson and David Lum, who provided the deputy lead this year, and I'm very grateful for their assistance. I do feel slightly awestruck following on from Ian Macmillan. Those sonnets, which were prepared as part of the original assessments, provide a wonderful introduction to the special character and qualities of each of those places. But following on from the successful Urbanism Awards Revisited event that we held last Friday, I'd really like to thank all those who participated in the places category during these challenging times, some at very short notice, others with clearly pressing demands on their time. I'd also like to thank Grosvenor for the sponsorship and the continuing support of this category. So turning now to the three great places which the Academy selected earlier this year. Firstly, we have City Park in Bradford, West Yorkshire, which won the category in 2013. This has been an inspirational project on so many levels and probably one of the finest public realm interventions of its type in the UK to be delivered over the past decade. With the original concept for a mirror pool born out of a visionary city centre master plan by Will Alsop, the project saw the replacement of commercial floor space with public space. It was actually quite reassuring to hear how little the space has actually changed over the past 8 years, but I think that's largely testament to the quality of design and the way in which the space has been wholeheartedly embraced by local people. And what City Park has provided is a catalyst for confidence. It was a bold investment made during challenging times, and the project has been very successful in changing perceptions of the city and attracting footfall to the city centre. We also learned how the project has led to further major commercial investment being made in the city centre, and how this is continuing to do so with the redevelopment of the historic Odeon Cinema and the Northern Powerhouse Railway Station project. Secondly, to Sheffield in South Yorkshire, where the Peace and Winter Gardens were an early finalist in the awards from 2008. Opening in 1998, the Peace and Winter Gardens have turned a city without a definable historic centre into one which has a new heart. The Peace Gardens redefined an area of previously uninspiring green space, fusing cascading water and vibrant planting with beautifully detailed ceramics, whilst the Winter Gardens have provided a contrasting indoor space. Critically, these projects have changed the mindset towards public realm, with these projects representing just the start of an ongoing programme of city centre regeneration, with the Peace Gardens now forming part of a gold route linking the city centre's railway station with the town hall and university campus. Over the past 2 decades, Sheffield has pursued a major programme of interventions in public realm, the most recent of which are seeking to integrate demands of sustainable drainage and climate change. And finally, to Viking Triangle, a major regeneration initiative in a historic quarter in Waterford, Ireland, which was winner of the category back in 2017. Since the original assessment, the triangle has continued to flourish with the consolidation of outstanding regeneration already undertaken to date. the continuing conservation and rehabilitation of historic buildings, and further enhancements to public realm. There's also been a continuing focus on cultural regeneration, with further successful developments under the banner of the Museum of Treasures, including the reconstruction of a Viking dwelling. And again, we learned how a project has had a catalytic effect on the wider regeneration of a city, with the Viking Triangle project importantly setting a quality bar that citizens expect other projects to achieve. So to quickly reflect on what all these outstanding projects have in common, I think a key linking theme with all these places is they took on loved or undervalued parts of their respective city and transformed it. In doing so, they perhaps saw something that no one else had and exhibited great determination and vision in driving these initiatives forwards. All the projects have in their own particular ways had a catalytic effect, creating confidence, civic pride, and changing historic perceptions of those places, providing a benchmark for quality design and regeneration, resulting in a legacy which all these places can be proud. All projects have had led to rediscovery in the importance of public space and the contribution such projects can make to health and well-being. The pandemic only serving to remind us of this, and in all cases we've witnessed how such spaces have provided opportunities for outdoor enjoyment and an incentive for hospitality businesses to utilise and animate their external space. And finally, all projects represent, which we've looked at this year, have been public sector led. It's a shame we perhaps weren't able to contrast those with some of the finalists that have been delivered using other development models, but they all underline the importance of local leadership in regeneration and maintaining an in-house design capacity within local authorities. So following on from that, I'd like to put a couple of questions to our places that we've all got representatives from today. I'll ask these together and I'll allow you to respond to each of the questions in two parts. So firstly, I'd like to explore how the places have ensured ongoing success and resilience in challenging times. As I said, all the finalists are publicly owned and managed, and it's a shame we haven't been able to contrast that with which was subject to private management or factoring. But the question is, how have you been able to ensure the continuing success of the open spaces against competing financial pressures that all public authorities invariably face? And the second question, all the projects and resulting spaces now form established parts of the city fabric. And how easily do you think they will evolve and adapt to the challenges posed by climate change and growth in urban populations? And what do you think these spaces and places will be like in 50 years' time? So I'm not quite sure who I'm handing over to first, but if we do it in the same order as we did the presentations last Friday, Bradford, would you be able to maybe try and respond to those questions?
Sure, Francis, they're quite long. I'm glad I started making notes when you started talking.
I can repeat the questions again if you want to prompt.
All right, okay. And feel free to stop me mid-flow if you need to. So I'm Sheila O'Neill. I was the project director for City Park, and I'm the assistant director within the Department of Place at Bradford. And I guess the ongoing success and resilience of City Park for me is all about it's the quality of the design and the fact that when we were designing the scheme, we were very mindful of how it would be managed and maintained into the future. So all of the materials were very carefully selected and tested, and we went out and did lots of study visits, looking at things that had worked and things that hadn't worked. Mm-hmm. And I think we used that information to both design the scheme and think about the whole life costs of the scheme. So we've established, one of the things I did very early on in the process was go to our executive and secure the principle of establishing a sinking fund, so that we were constantly putting away money that was in a protected account for whole life costs. So we knew at certain points in time we would have to replace some big cost items like the sand filters in the plant room, for example. So all of those things were both shared with members who were making those decisions at the outset of the scheme, so they knew what the cost would be and they were making provision for them, so they felt comfortable with that. And I don't know if I said this in the assessment, but when I talked to them about it, I talked about it as a child. So as a baby, you've got certain costs you have to pay for. As that baby grows up, they've got different costs. So you might have to put a deposit on a house for them. It's exactly the same with City Park. It grows with you, and you have to pay for the things that you need to keep it in good condition. Having said that, it's relatively low maintenance. And going on to your second point, I guess that part of the fabric, those decisions are easy because the space has become so valued that there is no debate about the value of the space, and keeping it maintained and keeping it looking pristine. It does a lot of that itself. For me, the maturing of the space has been a real joy to watch, that it's softened, the hard landscape, the paving has softened, and the trees have grown, and that's really helped kind of bring another dimension to the scheme that obviously has evolved as it's matured. And alongside that, the adaptation to climate change and so on, the water system is a closed loop system, so the water gets filtered through sand filters and so on. We collect rainwater and filter that. But also, as we replace things as part of that whole life plan, we're able to take advantage of technological advances. So we're using less electricity, less utility bills, and all of those things. So I think as we adapt to changes in the climate and so on, the space will adapt also, and we're very keen to make sure that it remains efficient and effective. And a lot of that is down to the quality from Arups as our engineers, and Fountains Workshop as a fountain designers, and Gillespie's as landscape designers.
Okay.
So I think I'll leave it there, Francis, if that's all right.
That's a fantastic response. So clearly the quality of design from the outset, and I think ring fencing of funding for future maintenance. Sheffield, are you available to respond to that?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Simon Ogden here. Peace and Winter Gardens have a lot in common with Bradford, so a lot of the same lessons apply. Investing in quality materials that age well was, I think, a wise decision that was encouraged by the Millennium Commission, funded a lot of the early works, and has proved to be a wise investment. I suppose I'd also highlight the commitment of the teams that actually look after the spaces. I did say in my presentation last week that I think the quality of the spaces attracted a very high calibre of individual to come into the service, whether it is the city centre ambassadors or the Peace Gardeners who became the city centre horticultural team. And many of those people that came in after 1998 are still with us 22 years later. And as you can judge from that, they've really devoted their working lives to those spaces and derived, hopefully, a lot of pride and satisfaction, if not exactly colossal salaries. So I think that commitment and prestige to working on those spaces, the public appreciation that they receive, is an important thing about placekeeping. You need to respect and honour the people that keep them looking, as you hope they will be in 20 years' time. In terms of response to climate change, again, those of you who heard me talk last week will know that the thinking of our landscape team, our in-house landscape team, and the clients such as myself, has moved on a little bit from our aspirations when we did these spaces in the 90s, particularly in the handling of water, where early on we just wanted to get moving water into the scheme because of its many attractions, both aesthetically and also in terms of well-being. But I think we've now tried to incorporate water drainage as a more fundamental part of the actual design of the spaces, so that the spaces are designed to deal with extreme weather and to take advantage of it, if you like. So in the more recent spaces like Charter Square, University Campus, Greater Green, we've tried to create urban planting schemes that are resilient to dry periods, but also can cope with and help to manage surface water, keep it out of the rivers and the sewers, and hold it in suds, so that we actually contribute to the resilience of the city. And those kind of prairie type planting schemes are also pretty low maintenance. They're not completely maintenance free, of course, but they are light on energy and on labour in comparison to more traditional sorts of landscaping schemes. So in that way, and also in terms of making spaces that people want to walk, cycle, get out of the cars and use, hopefully the public spaces do make their contribution to making the city more prepared for climate change and indeed battling climate change.
Okay, thank you very much, Simon. So the key points there really, you know, getting commitment to maintenance, also considering maintenance from the outset, but you're considering it in the design of as an integral part of the design of public realm. Maurice, I know you've been able to join us from Waterford would you like to have a go at answering those two questions?
Have a try. Thank you, Francis. Hello to everybody. Maurice Conway, I'm an architect with Waterford City and County Council. I've been one of the project architects on the Viking Triangle. I suppose, like some of our colleagues, our approach has been to design very flexible and robust spaces using a very high high quality palette of materials. Our idea was to allow the activity around the public spaces to spill out onto the public spaces, to encourage that activity and encourage ownership. We've been successful in that, and this ownership, I think, is one of the key points for us. We set up Viking Triangle Trust, which managed the Viking Triangle. The local authority was just one partner within that grouping. This was successful. It augmented our presentation crews. It allowed local residents, traders, our museums to be very hands-on with the public space, and that was encouraged. I think, future-proofing, strangely enough, one of the key concept of our Viking Triangle was that we showed 1,000 years in 1,000 steps. And as we look at our public spaces, now we look back at what they were 100 years ago when they were, not car dominated. They were much more accessible to everybody. There was lots of disparate things going on the streets and public spaces. And it encouraged the use of our streets and public spaces, very much the glue that binds the city together. And we find that we're heading back towards that. Our recent pandemic and movement restrictions, we found that when the restrictions were opened up, our traders and the activities around our public spaces were very easily able to spill out, and quite successfully. As a matter of fact, some of our traders had laughed and said to us, "This is what you've been telling us for a number of years could happen," and it's happening. I suppose from a sustainability point of view, we have an energy bureau within the local authority that we set up to work with many stakeholders, and they future-proof and I suppose look over all our proposals, be it public lighting, be it water movement, to try and future-proof pretty much everything they do. And they also offer that level of expertise to our stakeholders and residents and traders.
Maurice, thank you very much for that response. So really the key issues there, I think, considering the longevity of design from the outset, also encouraging adjacent owners to take responsibility for those spaces and promote the animation of space. I think in terms of achieving sustainable design, it's getting that knowledge and expertise at the right time. We are running out of time, I'm being told, so thank you very much for your responses to those questions. I'll now hand you back to Tony Reddy, the chair.
Thank you, Francis. We'll move quickly on to the next category, which is the Great Street category. And I'll ask Ian to join us again with his 3 sonnets for the contestants. Thank you, Ian.
I do realise that all these sonnets are relentlessly upbeat, which is a good thing, I guess. And I think the streets are the ones that have changed the most, because all the street poems are about gathering and getting together and having a nice espresso whilst putting your arm around somebody. But anyway, Argyle Street in Glasgow, which is a fantastic street, I've got to tell you. And this is a kind of list of what it is. More than a street, this, an almanac, a carnival, a market, a place to stroll, a tea dance, a musical, a theatre of anecdote where it takes you so long to wander from one to the other, you need strong coffee or something stronger afterwards. Well, you met all those people you know, those you haven't seen for years and those you saw yesterday. Just forget what you came for and wander around and in between, and you can hear the rumble of the trains, you can see the gleaming of the diamonds in the jeweller's shop, and the sky is as blue as only an Argyle street blue can be. You want to live here. You never want this street to stop. That's the great thing about a street, isn't it? When you just want it to carry on and keep going and kind of meet itself round the back, like Finnegan's Wake does. That's a literary reference there. Oliver Plunkett Street in Cork. I wandered down there when I've done a gig based on knitting, which one day I'll tell you about.
Yeah.
Step out with me and take a bracing walk down a street that caters for every need, where here are the living rhythms indeed, built around shopping and singing and talk. This place is Oliver Plunkett Street, Cork. Wander down it, and this fine day will lead to somewhere magical, somewhere to feed. Life is a specials board written in chalk. Length of this street is the length of a day, to wander and watch and sit down and rest. Sunrise to sunset, this space is a place of regeneration with something to say. Streets that remind us they can be the best. Oliver Plunkett Street, setting the pace. I tried to write that in a certain different kind of sonnet to give an idea of the kind of the jagged rhythms of a street like Oliver Plunkett Street. I remember walking down there when I'd done this show about knitting, wearing the hat that I'd knitted during the show. Park Lane, Poynton. Got a great affection for Poynton because it's one of the places I did one of my first gigs in the school in about 1981. So this is me revisiting Poynton. And the difference is amazing. I couldn't have written this poem a few years since. I couldn't have read it out. There's no way you'd have heard it. The noise of the traffic was enough to make you wince. And if you think about shared space, then this weren't it. And I'm writing in a language that's local and demotic to describe a transformation from red stoplights to a place that's welcoming and truly democratic, from a stuck traffic jam to a transport of delights, because this is a truly local answer to a problem that scarred a lovely village and cut it clean in two. So if you wanted to cross to the barber's from your flat, it would be quicker if he posted the scissors to you. Now the traffic slows, the people walk, space is truly shared. Poynton's been completely changed. My poem can be heard. There's me trying to rhyme shared and heard in what I thought at the time was a clever way.
Great. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I'd now like to introduce Alistair Barr, who is going to the lead assessor for the Great Street category. Alistair.
Thank you, Ian. Fantastic poems, as always. This has been an incredible process, this idea of revisiting. I obviously want to thank the people from the Great Streets, Howard, Carhall, Tony, Emma. It must have been a real shock where into your email inbox came this thing saying, hi, remember us, we're the Academy of Urbanism. How about going round one more time? And I'm glad to say you all responded with passion and enthusiasm. So the thing about the streets is that this year, as most years, but even more so, they're so different, in terms of scale, in terms of activity, but I think there are common themes running through. So let's do it in the order we did it a couple of weeks ago. Argyle Street, such a long street, runs through so many different neighbourhoods. One of them, Finniston, has been voted the hippest place to live recently in a survey. But a diversity of population, of different ways of working, different ways of shopping. And I think what's happened from that is there's been ground up activism to actually say, let's change this street. And what's been interesting to hear about is the way that Glasgow City Council has actually responded to that with like a light touch in planning and actually encouraging and nurturing change. Now in Oliver Plunkett Street in Cork, much smaller scale, but that same sort of process. this is an amazing street in terms of the shops. Many of them are family owned. Some have been in 2, 3, 4 generations. And there was a feeling that with the high street changing all across the world, they had to change as well. So the catalyst for this came from the shopkeepers. And again, they had a series of meetings where things started to change around. But then the architects in Cork City Council began to get involved as well. And it's that way that bottom-up activism meets sort of general governance. And the final one that we're talking about, Park Lane in Poynton. Now I know that Howard's described this as David and Goliath. So this is a town council, a county council, shopkeepers, residents, all with different passionate opinions. And I think everyone agrees that the end result has been a fantastic thing. So I'm just going to reflect on the themes that run through these 3 streets. And I would say that great streets are the work of many hands. By many hands, I mean many stakeholders. And sometimes they don't all agree, but that's part of the grit that makes the process interesting. So it's that idea of many hands. Everyone has an opinion about the high street. It seems like every time you open the paper or read an article, we're talking about the high street at the moment. These are places that show how good it is to talk. But I think the second theme is the one that, again, works at every level of scale in these places. And that is that you have to have courage and commitment. You have to have courage to think about things differently to having been thought about before. Embrace all the new realities of the high street. And then to make that happen means steering a path through those stakeholders. And each of the 3 streets, however different, has actually shown amazing courage and commitment. And I really admire them for doing that. So in this case, we're going to reflect rather than asking difficult questions, and we're going to reflect in the same order as Ian's poems. So I'm going to pass over, first of all, to Emma.
Thanks, Alistair. I agree. I think it was good to see the design of all the great streets is the work of many hands, coupled with informal activism and a light touch in policy terms. This has allowed entrepreneurs and urban pioneers to create attractive urban qualities within each. I think the real positives of this process has been learning how different approaches to urbanism and governance at the macro and micro scale has contributed to the vitality of each street, and also that small incremental changes can make a big difference. I thought that the different approaches to taming the car were really interesting. Each street has in its own way reformed the urban legibility of the area with measures to ensure that the car doesn't dominate, contributing to the vibrancy of the place. It was also beneficial to understand the different methods to the governance to support that change, the place-based approach and the drive for creating places that work better for people. In Glasgow, this was demonstrated in the new Anderson House and Regeneration Scheme, where the historic street pattern has been reformed and pedestrianised, creating a social hub and a series of play and activity spaces well used by the residents. It was good to see Cork went the full mile and pedestrianised nearly the whole street with a number of sensitively placed public spaces, which has positively contributed to the character and the vitality of the area. I also found the celebration of the work of many hands inspiring here, shared in the fine urban green and the mix of small businesses, which really gives some hope to the resilience of our town centres. This flexible approach to repurposing building and shops for other uses has really been a key driver to the resilience of Argyle Street. And it was interesting to see that this was a common theme. It was also interesting to hear the bottom-up approach in Park Lane and how local activism has improved the urban environment of the street by creating desire lines and changing the balance of the space given to pedestrians and the car. A great example of sensitive urban design improving legibility and movement across the street and creating a high quality public realm that enhances the sense of place. I really love the idea that there was community guardians that were taking ownership of the quality control and ensuring that the quality of finish is retained. This is wonderful. Our last point is going forward. We are reviewing the design of our streets to create more accessible, inclusive places for people and how they become more resilient to climate and climate shocks. The pandemic has strengthened this move to create more resilient public space for people to move around and to support their health and well-being. We have just launched a grant programme called Animating Spaces that will provide new funding for communities to develop temporary interventions to create space for safe movement and trading within our town centres that will further support creative entrepreneurs through like policy and funding. I'd just like to say thanks to Cork and Poynton for sharing their knowledge and best practice, and to Alistair and the Academy for bringing us together. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Emma. We're going to jump really quickly onto Cork now. We're running slightly behind, but I know those guys from Cork, so they don't like to chat too much, do you?
I know a hint when I hear one. Okay, what struck me is that all of the streets are ancient parts of the urban fabric, and that what we have both at the award time and at the review time is we've got a snapshot of the street as it is now. It was different 100 years ago, and it'll be a different 100 years hence. I really enjoyed the question that was asked about what do we do about the onslaught of barbers, coffee shops, and nail bars, and the response being that, well, we will change, and they will change as demand changes. The streets will change. These are not static things, but that the success of all three streets is the fine-grained nature of them, that business can fail, something can stop in the street, and the community and the people demand a new unit or a new piece, and it fills in and it continues on. As an architect in Ireland, I was lucky enough to go to the RIAI conference yesterday and listen to Ricky Burdett talking about urban form. And in the discussion that followed, Gráinne Shaffery, an Irish architect, said that being an architect working on a building is a bit like being introduced to a book at chapter 3 when the plot has already been set. So what I'd like to do is, as an architect, I'd like to thank the Academy of Urbanism and the academicians and my tutors and colleagues at Strathclyde University for allowing me to start reading chapter 1 and chapter 2. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to move on to Howard and Harv now. Remember, you're the last ones of this section, so we
have plenty of time then. Okay. I'm going to follow up with the bottom up and use that expression, the fine-grained nature. I'm not going to be quite as strategic in some of my comments. In fact, I moved them from impressions to realizations because that was the best word for what I was taking away. A realization was that psychological engineering is as powerful or can be as powerful as physical engineering. I think David Enright's book was quite seminal in that, but I've seen it in practice. I also realized that if you change the public realm, you'll change the economics of the public realm, but don't fret about it. Markets and market demand will sort that out for you. You can't dictate it, just know it's going to happen. I think I also realized that if you embrace all the alternatives, all the options, or at least you try to, you'll have a better scheme, as long as you don't compromise on your principles. And one of our principles, well, an example being that we gave the visibly challenged lobby everything they wanted except traffic lights, and it was a better scheme for doing that. I also realised that there's one speed limit or one speed number that really does matter above all others, and that's 20 miles an hour. You can forget any other number above that in terms of safety, in terms of sharing, in terms of having something that you can call community in that space. You have to come to that 20 mile an hour position, and I hadn't realised that before. I also realised that if it is a bottom-up scheme, so it comes from the people, and it doesn't come from County Hall or it doesn't come from the Town Hall, you have to know more than the engineers sat in front of you. You have to read Transport Research Laboratory papers. You have to read the Highways Act, you have to do so much work to know when they're bullshitting you, because they will, because that's their easy default. Now, I'm not setting this up as an acrimonious position, it's just the reality of it. To see the vision through, you have to know more. And one of the realisation was the cost benefit of these schemes. A death in Cheshire cost the public purse £2.5 million. We only need to save one person every couple of years from being killed, and we're on our way. I'll close there and let Harv have a little finish and see what she realised in terms of being fresh set of eyes.
So 1 minute to go.
Okay, so just I think something that's come to the fore since I've been looking at this is how the town actually views itself and the shared space. So recently a high school student has done a project for his geography A-level, and one of the questions was around uniqueness, and overwhelmingly people thought that Poynton was a unique place, and overwhelmingly that was because of either the shared space or because of the effects of shared space. So independence, shops, vibrancy, and a place that they felt that other towns, neighbouring towns, would be proud to call their own. I think courage and commitment, as Alistair said, is really important. This was always a Marmite project. People either love it or hate it. Even now, even when people see the benefits, some people still really hate our roundels. And I don't know why, because I think they're lovely. I just want to thank Glasgow and Cork and also Alistair and the Academy. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We're going to wrap that up. So many things to talk about. Why don't we all meet at the bar later on? Later on, you know, in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Alistair. And that sounds like a very good idea. But if we don't hurry up, there won't be time to go to the bar. Our next category is the Great Neighbourhood category, and I'm going to call Ian again to present his 3 sonnets. Thank you, Ian.
The thing I notice about these sonnets, another word that keeps recurring, is light. There's such a lot of light in these sonnets. Grand Canal, Dublin. A canal is built from water, and engineering, and this part of the city is built on light and glass. Stand still for a moment, that's applause you're hearing from the late night theatre as the night clouds pass and the moon strikes a chord and makes a reflection in the windows of an office that reflect the shine of a kind of art and commerce intersection that treads a very fine, very fulfilling line. If cities are to prosper in these thin times we're in, then this is the mixture they need to achieve. Places to work, places to play, and the kind of thin space between the two that helps you to believe that a place like Dublin's fine canal quarter has made a renaissance of engineering and water. I was pleased with rhyming the word thin there, I've got to tell you. Kelham Island, place I know very well in Sheffield. This island floats on a sea of ideas. This island glows as the city is sleeping. This island floats on a river of beers. This island shows that the past is worth keeping. Tell 'em it's Kelham, this shout from the bus, that's worth all the plaudits and worth all the fuss. Tell 'em it's Kelham, for leisure and more, lit by the glow from an open pub door. That glow matching the glow from the past. That glow from the foundry's window of light, that glow showing what was made to last, that glow from the grins that spill into delight. Tell 'em it's Kelham, where making and craft combine in an island of skill and hard graft. And then Merchant City, Glasgow, more light, more streets, more movement. Looked at on a map, this is a tight net of streets, but it's more than that. Much more. It's the sound of laughter and the age-old sound of music leaking through an open door. And the music is the music of renewal, a tune that sounds different every single day as the lessons of history from that hard school are learnt, not forgotten, not tidied away. Looked at on the map, this is angles and lines, but the reality's shifting. The reality moves from a warehouse escape where the moonlight shines and lights up a vista that needs a good scrub to a web of renewal, an idea made real, a vast global menu, a cultural hub. Of course, like I said before, these do seem like messages from a recent past that one day will return.
Thank you, Ian. I now hand over to Tim Challens, the lead assessor for the Great Neighbourhood category. Tim.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Ian, very much. I now feel that as I'm in the middle, I've got to help catch up some time. So I'll be briefer than I was going to be. You'll be pleased to know. Neighbourhoods, I've always found neighbourhoods a very interesting category because they're so very hard to define, and we've had long discussions about how you define them. They have soft boundaries. They don't support a comprehensive selection of services or amenities, or do they have discrete economies? But they are critical to and make a significant contribution to a city or town as a whole, economically, socially, and culturally. But I think neighbourhoods are generally social and cultural constructs, although they're often identified as zones for planning investment purposes. And in my long experience of doing this, the great neighbourhoods' most consistent feature is that they're largely defined by the people who live, work and play in them, and often characterised by the strength of the community involvement in their regeneration and their social and economic development. So the 3 neighbourhoods we're revisiting all exhibit these characteristics. However, in Dublin and Glasgow, the principal development lead is the local authority, whereas in Sheffield, there's a community-led partnership with the city council. There was some time lag between our various visits. We visited the Grand Canal area of Dublin in 2013, which is some time ago now, when we noted a developing neighbourhood with a new high-value residential and business district that had been able to attract major international investment, which was critical both to the survival of the Dublin and Irish economy, and is bordered by a strong established dockland community. Kellan Island in Sheffield was a worthy winner of the category in 2018, so that's not very long ago at all. But that was based on its continuing regeneration and the strong local authority and community partnership. We first visited Merchant City in 2006, which seems a very long way away, when it was described as the Greenwich Village of Glasgow. Now Greenwich Village is described as the Merchant City of New York, but an urban village with a metropolitan character and the centre of many cultural activities in the city. As we heard in our excellent presentations a few weeks ago, all these great neighbourhoods are continuing to improve through the strength of their governance, their resilience, which has been tested heavily during the pandemic, and the combination of community and local authority or development agency management and support. So I've asked Deirdre Scully from Dublin City Council, Sam Wharton from Glasgow City Council, and Ben McGarry from Kellam Island and Neeps End Community Alliance to reflect on the question of how important to the regeneration of a city neighbourhood is the structured working relationship between local communities and local government that goes well beyond simple consultation. But before they respond, I'd just like to thank them very much, as many others on this, for actually being part of this revisit and putting in a considerable amount of work and time at very short notice into the whole process. And I'd also like to thank Umbretta and Rosemary, my deputy assessors, who've given me a lot of support during this. So over to Deirdre.
Thanks, Tim. I suppose it's a hard question to answer because I suppose the story of Docklands and its evolving into a new community within the heart of the city has taken place over 20 years. But at each stage, and it hasn't always been primarily led by Dublin City Council, but I think one of the key things is that at each stage, lessons learned have been built into the following stage. At the early stages of the area, it was primarily banking district. You know, the lack of engagement was a lesson learned early on, and that was built on by the Dublin Docklands Development Authority. And from that point onwards, the community council and the role of the local community in the area has been very much part of both the master planning of the area and also as different planning schemes have moved on. And Dublin City Council have kept that going, and that there is always a strong presence by the council in the area. There's an open door policy of engagement, and the community still meet continue on a regular basis within those offices to discuss the various projects and schemes and that are going on. And I think also a key part is the continuing lead as regards investment, and particularly improving the public realm, and to keep the project going and not to just to see it as a one piece you know, that the council needs to continue to invest in the area and to bring further changes and improvements, and that the changes that are brought in reflect the social history of the area. And I think that building on that story is something that's very much at the heart of what a lot of the community representatives are keen to see, that the maritime history, that the docks history, the history of the people who worked in this area is preserved both in the new material that goes into the area and also celebrated in the historic material that is restored. So I think very much that's part of how you shape and build a community, that people all feel a sense of belonging. And we're very, very lucky with the amount of historic docks that are there and with the river, and that it's a very blue space, and that it, you know, if you actually drew a line around the area and count out the hectares, including the water makes up nearly half. So we're blessed from that point of view, and it's a wonderful asset to celebrate, and also a way to bring people together, because the water provides a space for people to meet, to mix, and to be active or passive engagers with the water there. And that's something Dublin City Council will continue to try to bring forward as a way of uniting and building communities in the future. But I really loved, I just want to say, I loved the poem. Fantastic. The celebration of water engineering is all about what Docklands is about. Oh, fantastic.
I need to send you another copy because you weren't around when they...
yeah, I want to write it out and stick it on the wall. It's fabulous.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do that. Sam from Glasgow.
Hello everyone, Sam Worden here for Glasgow City Council, representing Merchant City, and given Tim's challenge, we reflected on the relationship between the community and the City Council in the transformation of Merchant City. And yeah, really, I suppose a flexible approach has been taken with the partnerships and programs that have evolved over time. It's evident from the outset that close relationships were forged between the City Council and a range of energetic, pioneering entrepreneurs, developers and architects that gravitated to the area in the 1980s. It was the proximity, perhaps, of Glasgow City Council's offices at City Chambers to the emerging district of bars and cafes that the Merchant City is known for today that may have helped form these relationships. More likely, though, it was the public ownership of buildings, grant aid and a flexible approach to density and commercial uses that gave an incentive for private sector to partner with the City Council to develop whole city blocks. Following redevelopment of vacant historic warehouses through the 1980s and 1990s, the Townscape Heritage Programme was initiated during the 2000s to continue the support available to address conservation deficit. The Townscape Heritage Initiative had an office based within the Merchant City, away from the City Chambers, to continue the close relationship with the community. The Townscape Heritage Initiative helped shape the property strategy, with the role of the arm's length organisation City Property focusing on a longer term economic impact. Nevertheless, in recent years, the property strategy has perhaps shifted to a shorter term financial returns with the City Council not necessarily being perceived as being supportive in the eyes of local businesses. The challenge of getting the balance continues with the twin pressures of a financially restrained local authority and structural economic change for retailers. Now a vibrant neighbourhood with an established residential community, the City Council City Centre regeneration team continued to engage with residents and businesses on ad hoc programmes, including the Stored Spaces programme for meanwhile uses on vacant sites, and facilitating the involvement of artists in the mural trail enlivening Gable Ends. Spatial planning frameworks for city centre neighbourhoods are now being prepared, including one for the Merchant City, with community participation at its heart. It's hoped that this will shape future development, including the reallocation of space. We hope that this ongoing collaboration will reinforce the resiliency and vibrancy of Merchant City, and the bars and cafes will welcome us back soon. That's me.
Thank you very much, Sam. And finally, to Ben in Sheffield. You've got about 2.5 seconds, Ben. You'll be fine.
Got a stopwatch here. So, and I've got a paper because I talk a lot. Actually, we're going to do 2 quick presentations. One from me. So ours was an industrial conservation area. So the heart of steelmaking in Sheffield started here, and the council had the foresight in the late 90s to make this into a conservation area so that the old factories and the heritage wasn't destroyed. Since then, So basically our area, the resources for this area and the infrastructure were all geared up to industry. Over the years and over the past 10, 15 years, there's been a conservation of the old factories and a conversion of them into residences. So we now become primarily a residential area rather than an industrial area with an infrastructure legacy from industry days. And we have approximately 5,000 residents here. It's a destination area because it's very pretty. And we've got bars and cafes and restaurants, a museum, and lots of small independent breweries. So it's also a real beer heart as well. It took us a couple of years, over the last couple of years, to harness our residents through a variety of outdoor concrete projects. And that enabled us to build a reputation with a variety of partners, primarily the City Council, but also our 2 universities and a range of other organisations to help us. And building that reputation was the most important bit. We did our homework. We got lots of social capital here, and we used lots of postgraduate students to do studies for us and help us. All in all, it got people thinking about what resources they wanted and what infrastructure they needed. And so that got people ready to engage on a more permanent basis with the council. And I'll hand over to Rob about that.
Thank you, Ben.
Rob, I'm afraid you've got under a minute.
Okay, I'll keep it very brief then. So picking up on what Ben was saying and responding to your question, Tim, I think we've now formed a neighbourhood forum. So that's given some structure to the working relationship that we have with outside bodies and the local council in particular. And I think it's still, of course, work in progress. But I think what I wanted to share was that we're already seeing some positive benefits from that structured relationship. The council is starting to approach us directly, which is great from a community point of view, and also, as importantly, redirecting developers to speak with us as well. So, very, very important from the community's point of view.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that's dead on time. So I won't say any more about this. I think everybody can pick up what's happened with the neighbourhoods. These are fascinating places, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you, Tim, and to all the contributors, Deirdre, Sam, Ben, and Rob. And we'll now move on to the Great Town category, and I'll yet again introduce Ian to present his 3 poems.
Well, the first one, Derry, Londonderry, it's an unusual one actually in the way that it's actually a sonnet, but it doesn't actually rhyme. So a bit of a change there. Derry, Londonderry. It's all about the Peace Bridge, that wonderful bridge. Here is a bridge, here is a peace bridge. Here is a peace bridge at night, it shines. Here is a peace bridge at dawn, it sings with hope and promise and the idea that simply walking across a bridge can make you whole. Here is a bridge, here is a peace bridge. Here is a peace bridge over the water, reflective. Here is a peace bridge under the sky. It brings places and people close with the notion that simply standing on a bridge can be a song of peace. Here is a bridge. Here is a peace bridge. Stand, gaze, walk, dance, sing. Peace bridge. Frome, I've had many happy hours in Frome. I'll try and do a clever rhyme with Frome halfway through, which maybe works, I don't know. Let's pan the camera, tighten shot and zoom down to a town that rests in southern hills, a place of ancient byways, modern skills. What else could I be looking at but Frome? Imagine that this town's a stylish room with art and craft along the window sills, a cool space where the population chills with Wi-Fi access by an antique loom. Imagine that this town's a theatre space, then pull the curtains wide, enjoy the show. This is a town where fair trade makes its home, where independent shops show their proud face and independent minds know where to go. But take a tip from me, don't call it Frome. See what I did there? Paisley is the third one. Here is a place where, as my dad used to say, you can learn something different every single day. He really said that. And he would have loved this, Paisley on the rise. He always thought of Paisley as a shining location on a golden hill, every street a new surprise. And now, cleansed by the sunlight of regeneration, there's a future for the past in the renewed museum, a future for the present in the old town hall, and futures for the future. Come along and see 'em, as through the walkways of the town we weave past culture and learning and housing and shops, where the weavers used to work, and now we all believe, as my dad used to say, Paisley's where the penny drops, because my dad was from quite close to there, and that was one of his phrases, Paisley's where the penny drops.
Thank you, Ian. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our lead assessor for the Great Town category, Michelle Grant.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you, Ian. Can I just start by saying it's been a great pleasure to spend time with the three towns over the last few weeks. And thank you to everyone who's been part of that process, particularly in these difficult times when I know that giving time to this sort of thing is particularly hard. Derry Londonderry won the Great Town Award 8 years ago, and that award happened at a pivotal point in the city's history. And to quote John Kelpie, the Chief Exec of Derry and Strabane District Council, who presented at the Great Town Lunch Hour, 2012 was a moment of new opportunity. You could feel it in the air. Today, you can still feel it in the air because the city is no longer divided by a river, but united by the Peace Bridge, and that has become a big driver of environmental and community projects. New governance structures that were introduced in 2015 have opened up opportunities to connect the rural hinterland to the centre more strongly and to further reinforce close working within the city's communities. It's refreshing to hear discussion about both economic and social well-being and to understand the actions that flow from that. A 2019 city deal is helping to deliver the city plan. Oh, and it's also been voted one of the happiest places to live in. Frome measures success by the level of community participation and ensuring that that participation reaches all its communities in ways that stimulate empowerment. That commitment to people coming together is perhaps encapsulated in the town having the largest free street market in the southwest. All this impressed the assessors 4 years ago, so as did the town's commitment to the environment. So it was very heartening to see how these themes have developed since. The environment continues to sit at the heart of decision making. Making the town more energy resilient is about practical projects to cut costs in carbon and to reduce fuel poverty. For example, Freeco is an environmental company that invites the local community to invest in shares in the environment. And this company takes on small scale projects, a very impressive example of environment and community coming together. And finally, turning to Paisley. This exhibits some impressive community collaboration too, from its approaches to public housing to designing the town centre. Investment in cultural institutions has formed an important part of investing in place and celebrating the heritage that has shaped not only the place, but also the people. Future Paisley, the town's 2030 vision and strategy, uses a design-led approach that sets out a very highly persuasive and visual future. The strength and rationale of this vision has been challenged by COVID in recent times, and all of that has happened at a moment in time for Paisley when the cultural development projects have already started and are underway. Paisley's ability to look inwards to its own strength of its communities for solutions, while at the same time looking outward to national challenges and how they're impacting on the town, has reinforced for them that their vision is still the right one, but the journey is evolving. Rebalancing the town centre away from retail dominance to residential and to cultural and social space is now seen as even more important. So a bit of a reflection really on that. When I was thinking about this, it seems that all three towns are looking inwards and outwards, and that seems to be a recurring theme. And seeing new outward challenges as actually testing the resilience of the place and its strategies, systems and people. And it's interesting that those inward strengths and strategies appear to be proving very robust and relevant, but perhaps are needing to be creatively adapted. So it'll be interesting to elaborate on that reflection, or indeed to contradict it if you don't agree with it, a bit further, especially thinking about people, planet and resilience, which are some of the themes for today. Perhaps I could turn to Derry, Londonderry, to kick off with that. I don't know who's there. Is it Margaret we've got?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Margaret. Hi.
And Tony's here as well.
Hello, Tony.
Hello. Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Well, obviously, Margaret and I can share our very short time and maybe given our observations and reflections, but it's great to have this opportunity first and foremost, and it was great to participate a few weeks ago. And I think, Michelle, just really coming out of this, you know, you used the word resilience, and I think that we've displayed resilience is a very strong characteristic that we've displayed throughout all of our many challenges, and our presentation a few weeks ago would have maybe outlined that in terms of how we continually respond and react to those, you know. And obviously, you know, we've come through quite a lot of transformation over, I think, you know, if you think about it politically over the past, say, 15, 20 years, and then about how we are then responding to that in terms of bringing that right down to our communities in terms of driving regeneration, etc. You know, and we've seen, you know, the opportunities, and obviously Ian's piece there in relation to the Peace Bridge was very, very interesting in terms of how that has been a real unifying characteristic in terms of embedding that resilience. You know, so yes, you know, we're like most locations we have our challenges, but we feel that, you know, throughout all of those, you know, we've basically tried to respond to them as positively as we can, you know. And obviously regeneration, we're seeing, you know, even from a council perspective, how we have responded to the new challenge of administration. The fact that, you know, we've underwent in 2015 the local government transformation, how we've taken on new powers, and how we're working with community planning. So, you know, again, resilience, and obviously we're looking now onwards to, you know, we're as I said, we're a cross-border location as well. We have very strong connections with Republic of Ireland, County Donegal, and again, you know, Brexit will throw up its challenges, but again, that resilience will shine through in relation to the work we're doing with our counterparts in Republic of Ireland to turn it into opportunity as well. And you talked about people, planet and resilience, and Marcus, maybe just want to come in some of the, suppose, the planet focused elements that we've been doing as well.
Hi everyone. Hi Michelle. Yeah, I suppose really just to add on to what Tony said, I think for us it's a great place that we have our great town is really about putting people first, and the planet is very much a part of that as well in terms of how we look ahead, looking at particularly at the challenges around the climate emergency, and also looking at how we can be more aware of how we manage our economy in terms of that circular economy. And I suppose what I would like to also add is, in terms of that resilience, it's also about the people, and the people, as you reference, I suppose, being the fact that we have a happy place here. I think the humour that we have in our town is one of our great strengths, and I'm sure that could be said about many places, but I think the people, the humour, and also that resilience that Tony's talked about, coming through all those difficult times and still managing to look ahead and improve, and particularly take that planet emergency and what we need to do to protect our planet and our environment very much to the fore. Thank you.
Frome, I think we've got Anne and Rachel and possibly Peter, so I don't know which of you wants to have a bit of a... Hi Anne, hi.
Hi, I'll go first. This is Anne, yes. Reflecting on this whole process, and particularly the idea of climate change and resilience. And Frome is a relatively small town. There's only 27,000 people in Frome. And we were one of the first councils to declare a climate emergency. And there is no way we can get to carbon zero at 2030 on our own. So it's all about partnership working, partnership with other organizations, other levels of government, but mostly partnership with the people. And it's the people that make the place. It's the people that make Frome. So working in partnership with the community, doing things with the community rather than to the community, bring them on board, because the only way we're going to build a resilient community, a resilient place, is by the behavioural change of people in order to achieve those really quite stretching targets that climate change enforce on us. So it's all about partnership, it's all about the people. I don't know, Rachel, whether you want to add anything there.
No, I think really that's said it all. To be honest, I think it's just that very notion that, you know, that there's that symbiotic relationship between the environment and between well-being. I think it's just imperative that they're seen as one and the same thing, and that it's not a mutually exclusive goal, and that by definition they need to go hand in hand.
Thank you.
And what I'd add.
And from both of you, a very succinct response. I think from Paisley, Susan, I think you've been able to join us. I don't know whether you've any thoughts to add to the our reflections.
Hi. I've not actually been involved in this process up to now, so apologies for not knowing all the background. But basically, just following on from what colleagues in Frome are saying, absolutely, you know, resilience is all about adaptation. And I think from Paisley's point of view, our Paisley Vision 2030, which Michelle mentioned, reflects this. We are very much still on the front foot in terms of Can you still hear me?
We can now. I just lost you a bit there.
Oh, right. Okay. I don't know. My connection's not great. And basically, I'm just saying that we're on the front foot. We continue to meet head on those challenges. And I think it's important to say that there really are no new challenges for town centre regeneration. There's only a different emphasis on how we address them. So in Paisley's perspective, with the driving force being the heritage and the culture, that is going to continue. That is Paisley's strength. And the council and all its partners and stakeholders are continuing to deliver the large-scale cultural regeneration agenda. And we've got over £110 million of capital investment in the town centre at the moment. And in terms of the new challenges that the last 9 months have brought, that is not changing its outcomes. It might be changing its emphasis and its timescale and possibly its budget, but it's not actually changing its outcome. So I think just reflecting on what some others have said, that definitely the key to successful regeneration, particularly in Paisley's point of view, is in that participation and engagement and consultation and making sure that this is regeneration for and by the people of the area and not to the people of the area. We just have to be a bit cute about it and find new ways of doing things. And I think certainly from the council's point of view, we have had to adapt and we have had to change. And I think some of those new practices will be carried on. And I think from a regeneration point of view, that can only be a good thing.
Thank you, Susan. And I think we've sort of come to the end of the town. So just to say again, thank you to everybody who's taken part, and also thank you to Pam Alexander, who was very much part of this process as well. Tony, back to you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to all of the contributors in that session on the Great Town. And we now move to our final session, which is on the European City of the Year. And I'll ask Ian for the final time to present his 3 sonnets on Aarhus, Bilbao and Utrecht.
This first one, Aarhus, it's such a lovely place, Aarhus. And I really enjoyed writing this poem, I've got to tell you. In its movement, like this city, find yourself refracted through yesterday, tomorrow, and the unexpected corners where the stories have collected. Walk here, through broad streets, feeling quite at ease, in the iceberg development as it grows and grows, in the institute where you can do as you please. Listen to the narrative everybody knows about how all the world calls Aarhus the city of smiles. How Aarhus, like an actor, plays all the different roles demanded of it. Vibrant city, youthful city, while if thinking people have taken the controls and are steering Aarhus to a shining future where constant change is blowing through the air, which how it feels in that place and in a lot of these cities, I've got to say. Bilbao, there appears to be a line missing from this poem, which I think adds something to it. That's the joy of redrafting, I've got to tell you. City as performance art, as conceptual art, as a place that makes you stop and see yourself framed in the morning's affecting, effective light. There's light again. There's the graft and sweating craft of industry here too. The art of making something out of nothing, of making money from something made from nothing. This is the glorious tension at Bilbao's heart. Performance heart, conceptual heart, a meeting of the making and the thinking and the way space is used to make more spaces that ponder and sing. Bilbao, make an exhibition of your splendid self. There's a line missing after that, but I think it ends quite well there, I've got to tell you. Utrecht. I tried to avoid the obvious rhyme here, but didn't do that well. It bursts with things you don't expect, this city under skies. It bustles, it takes time to reflect. It's a feast for the ears and eyes, so give your thoughts time to collect. As you stroll the teeming streets, take the map, go and inspect. This place will never be complete. There's always more that will affect the way you think of time and space. The more you walk, the more you suspect. This is progress with a human face. This is urbanism for the body and mind. Utrecht's past and future intertwined. So I tried to do a sonnet where I rhymed the word Utrecht all the way through until the end, which was harder than I thought it would be, I've got to tell you.
Thank you, Ian. I'd now like to introduce our three lead assessors for the European City of the Award, Victoria Wenray, Philip Jackson and David Lum.
Thanks, Tony. I think the three of us are going to do a quick summary of each of the cities, first of all, prior to the reflection. So starting with David and Aarhus. We've got radio silence. Are you there, David?
Okay, we cannot hear David. Should we move to the next one and try to solve the problem with David?
That sounds good. Philip, you
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect then. Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank Azir because he gave me a really good briefing on Bilbao. So I'd just like to thank him for his time about Bilbao. And we all know about the Bilbao effect, how over the past 30 years it has gradually been restructured. The whole city has been restructured and transformed. So once a heavy industrial city divided by urban motorways, flyovers, railways and polluted rivers, today it is a city of connected neighbourhoods with attractive buildings, public realm, parks, squares, where communities and people can come together. The transformation has made the city much more resilient. So it's been a great long-term strategy. Today, it's an attractive city for residents and for visitors. It's a city with its own identity that it has its own sense of place, and it's working hard for its citizens. People have a strong sense of identity, belonging, and ownership of the city. there's a strong feeling of social equity. And the city today still reflects on its industrial past, but it's continuing to look and invest in its future. Key in all of this has been the role of the city municipality. It has great autonomy, it's proactive, it's driving the city forward with good leadership and management. And it recognises that this is an ongoing process to improve the quality of life for the citizens in the city. Thanks.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, David.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. I didn't hear a word of that, Philip. I had to leave and rejoin and count taxis in squares. Right, Aarhus. Great pleasure to introduce Aarhus and give a reflection on this by way of introduction for a little bit of dialogue, I hope. I visited Aarhus in 2014 and again in 2017, both times with the Academy, for which I'm very grateful, because the first time was for the assessment of the European City of the Year in 2014, and then for our wonderful Congress in 2017. And Aarhus, called the City of Smiles, there's a lot of commonalities between Aarhus, Bilbao and Utrecht, but one of the things that makes me reflect very strongly with Aarhus is the way that the relationship between those who govern and those who are governed, i.e. the citizens. It's very clear that there's a very clearly defined and accepted process of devolved governance from the top down, from the central government to the neighbourhood. This is clearly reflected in the strong sense of ownership that people have in the city, and the fact that people are so at the forefront of everything that the city does. It compares dramatically with the way we relate. We had a Localism Act in 2011 in England and, or UK, should I say, I think I'm right in saying, in 2011, and we're still a in the process of running our communities and neighbourhoods and cities and spaces and places. But it's the uniqueness of the city of Aarhus that makes me want to sort of reflect on the fact that things like kindness seem to come out of everything that is said and done. And Stephen Willesee gave us a very winning discussion the other day when we had our revisit. One of the things, very simply put, is that in Aarhus, they have what they call city people. And it's a mark of respect to the homeless that they tend to refer to the city people, and they have policies for the city people. And I know I'm talking about people, and what the themes of our cities and our places and spaces is planet and resilience. But if it doesn't come from the bottom up, it's not going to come from anywhere when we start to look at beyond the cities. And that's something I'd like to perhaps get a bit of reflection on if we can. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And so to Utrecht. It was only last year, actually, that we visited Utrecht, and we welcome Ellen for being with us here today. Utrecht is the fourth largest city in the Netherlands, but actually it's also the fastest growing city. And as Ellen presented at our first session, it has been on a significant transformative journey. The current success of the city has come through serious commitment and time. It's not something that's happened overnight. And there are many layers to their success. For example, at government level, policy and decision making is supported by 3 pillars: healthy environment, healthy people, and healthy economy. And together, these create a model of healthy urban living. and become the core to all the city's activities. Physical changes have necessarily been sweeping and support this ideology. There's been the reintegration of canals, significant engineering exercise, the sustainable expansion of the city to accommodate the rapid growth, and the transformation to infrastructure. Utrecht's not only emerged as the world's most bicycle-friendly city, but also it's reinforced its links with adjacent cities to strengthen its economic power base and hence its rapid growth. A real thread through all of this, however, is the many layers of co-production that we saw. We were lucky enough to speak to city leaders, investors, developers, the community, cafe owners, shop owners, and there was a real commitment, supported, I have to say, directed, cajoled, steered by the city to strengthen the community through meaningful conversation and, importantly, partnering. So after that initial glitch, so apologies about that for everybody. Welcome David and Philip as co-lead assessors. Just like to move on to our reflections exercise, but prior to that, just like to say thank you, just reiterate everybody's thanks that, you know, this has actually been a great series of sessions. I've really enjoyed it. I know that many people have. And it's been a very collaborative exercise, which I think is very good for the theme that we're talking about today. And I would like to mention, welcome, I should say, Stephen from Aarhus, Azier from Bilbao, and Lynn from Utrecht for joining us today. And a few weeks ago, we asked the impossible of our guests, and that was to cover the great things that the cities have been doing in only 15 minutes. And what really engaged our interest in this first session was the significant journey that the cities had undertaken, but also how this had included a review of their values, and importantly, how to place people at the heart of the decision making. If you like, reprioritising cities around the people. So with this in mind, and coupled with the fact that following us, there'll be the panel discussion with the young urbanists based on the theme of people, planet and resilience, we thought we could focus our reflection on how each of the great cities are engaging, planning, creating a place that reflects the values and ambitions of the next generation. So I'd like to pass over to Azier in the first instance, if you're there, or with some of your reflections on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria, and thank you, Philip, for the introduction to the city of Bilbao. Well, in our case now, we are actually ending the new urban plan for the city. The city has been transformed in a plan that was approved in 1995. And now we are planning the city for the next 20, 30 years. It has been a process where 4,000 people has taken part in the discussions about how the city should be and which changes we should arrange for the future. Changing the city from the city providing city to the knowledge-based city, a more university city with more students, with more young people in the city. We have quite a lot of old people in the city and we need to attract young people to our city. But apart from that, we are making a big effort in all the neighborhoods to get the transformation of the city to all the corners of it. And so we are focusing in what we call the heart of each neighborhood. And there we try to arrange the public realm so that people can live better in their neighborhoods and live better outside their homes in the public space. Bilbao was until the 90s, a city that was planned for the car. The car was occupying almost all the space in the city. And now we had changed completely the priority. So the priority now is the pedestrian people, is the citizens of the city, and then the public transport system. And the last one is the private car. And so we are transforming all these public spaces with quality, with the same quality in all the spaces. We try to put also a little bit of good design in all those spaces that we are transforming. And also, as the city is completely surrounded by mountains and we have the neighborhoods climbing up the mountains, solving the accessibility problems that we have in all these neighborhoods, so that people with disabilities and people, old people living in those upper neighborhoods also can move walking along the city without any problem. In fact, actually, most of the people in the city move walking and using the public transport system, and only 12% of everyday journeys are done by private car. But I think the most important part, as I have said, and it has a strong relationship with the identity and with the sense of community that we have in the city, is that we want to guarantee, offer the same quality of life in all the neighborhoods that we have in the city. And for to achieve that objective, we are focusing with the same effort all the smaller transformation processes that we are developing in all those public realms that we have in all the neighborhoods of the city, in all the corners.
Thank you. So a real focus there on quality and equality. Stephen, I hope you're there. Would you like to, I know we had some good discussions yesterday as well. It'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's great. It's lovely to hear all the different dialects from all over the UK. Feeling really homesick. You know, I come from the Lake District originally, but I've been living here for 30 odd years. So it's very nice to be with you all again. I couldn't remember, it was 2014 since the group came to Aarhus, and again in 2017. So when I looked at the material from that period, a lot has happened, and it's growing rapidly with roughly 5,000 citizens a year. And basically the city wishes to make a good city for everyone, and we actually take that quite seriously. We have lots of different neighborhoods and quarters around the city, and we try to invent different ways of working with different populations around the city. We're working with a whole new harbour district. You'll see on if you look at the Google Aarhus, we have Aarhus and that beautiful drawing of iceberg project. And there's 4,000 people there, moved in there since 2014. So there's a whole group of people, well-established people living there, but also 25% of the people living there will be living in affordable housing. But we have to make a city in balance, and we have several housing quarters which are challenged, housing estates, and we're doing big master plans for these projects. And these can take 20 to 30 years in many instances. So what do you do with the children? They're going to school and they're going to miss out. So we've actually, in some instances, made areas, quarters, which we call instant cities, where we try to make temporary accommodation activities to engage with the different age groups and populations. So that's an important move. Likewise, it's a university city we have a population of 350,000 as a second city, and over 53,000 students. So it's a relatively young city, but we also must take care that we don't favoritize them too much. So when I talk about city people, in many cities they're called the homeless, we also like to engage with them and include them in our planning processes in certain parts of the town. So this is a very important move for us to make a good city for everyone, that they're also included in the planning processes. So we try to involve them in the way we're working with it. And this is one-to-one, lots of engagement meetings. A third method in working with this is working with prototyping the city, where we try to engage with citizens with one-to-one scale projects. You've seen some of them in the presentation, where we're actually inviting, well, the politicians are willing to take some risks because it's cheaper than doing a permanent project. But I'd like to be even more experimental in terms of engaging with the citizens with these one-to-one projects by creating dialogue and reactions. And sometimes we get some really interesting feedback. And some of them have actually ended up with, because we made a forest for 10 days in the central part of the city, 6 years later, we've actually made another vicinity in the area around there with a forest which is going to be there for 6 years. So we call it temporary permanence. And if people engage in it and find it comfortable and interesting, and different groups of using it, maybe it gives us the opportunity to make something more permanent. So we're talking about temporary, permanence, on lots of different scales, and, you know, for example, different age groups and different ethnic groups. So we're trying to be inclusive and socially inclusive in terms of our sustainable agenda on that front. Okay.
That's great, Stephen. Thank you. I like this idea of temporary permanence.
Yeah.
And Lynn from Utrecht, how are you doing? Are you able to join us? And it would be really good to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me as well. I was thinking about it because healthy urban living for everyone is our core theme. So that's all about now and all about the future as well. And if you're growing so fast, you have to think how to create the city for the future. And I think it's about creating places where people feel good and where people want to be. And that's people, well, it counts everybody. And there are all kinds of contrasts in the city that you have to take into account. The pace of a city is always fast, and yet you have to facilitate silence as well, or the opportunity to slow down in a city, to create nature when you have to develop lots of new neighborhoods, how to achieve more green space when you have to also develop an extra 12,000 houses in the city center. So it is about an anti-cycle, I think, that you have to allow yourself as a city when you think of the city of the future as well. And what also strikes me is that especially the next generation is very technological, and they use all kinds of technology. They're very smart. They use the city also as a smart place. And we have all these smart city developments as well. And at the same time, you have to create these places where people can meet up, where people can engage, where people can slow down, and even technological free zones for that matter. So if I think of the next generation of this city, those are the topics that come to my mind. And of course, I have shared all the other things that we do in Utrecht and how we work. So of course we do it with the community. I recognize a lot of the other contributions as well, and it really it's very inspiring to hear it.
Yeah, it's very rich, isn't it?
Yes.
That's lovely. Thank you. So some really nice things coming out there in terms of quality and equality from Azier, a city in balance, and then this idea from Stephen, and this idea from Lynn about facilitating silence in a city as well. So some really nice thoughts to take forward, I think. And I need to hand back to Tony, I believe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the three assessors, Victoria, Philip and David, for their fantastic contribution today, and also Azier, Stephen and Erling for their contributions. That concludes the 5 categories of the awards. And we're now going to move on to the next topic on the agenda, which is the Young Urbanists panel discussion. And this is going to be chaired by Umberta Romice, who is a senior lecturer in architecture at the University of Strathclyde and a deputy assessor of the awards neighbourhood category. So over to you, Umberta. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. Here I am, yes. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around. I see that there's almost the same number of people that we had at the beginning. And thanks to the Academy of Urbanism, of course, for inviting me to chair this session. My name is Umberta Romice. I'm an Italian architect and urban designer, but I've been also living in the UK for over 20 years now. The 5 past events and today's reflections have really been inspiring and informative. And I'm sure this session, I hope this session will be equally enjoyable. Aim of this session is to discuss how to combine the expertise and the lessons shared in the past weeks with the young researchers potential and aspirations as a cohort, so that issues of people, planet, and resilience are addressed in the best possible way. The outcome of this session might simply be to initiate a discussion on what concerns we share and what expectations we have as a start. And this would be an achievement per se. Clarity, after all, is the first step towards success. The three themes of people, planet, and resilience have been inherent through all the 5 categories of places celebrated. And we will focus on them now as well in particular. So when we talk about people, the questions are going to be how to design for them, how to involve them, and how to improve their quality of life. Resilience, is there something, if there's something that actually the past year has taught us, is that things don't always go according to plan, but life must go on and find a way to continue throughout all the hurdles that we encounter. So how can we help as people involved in the built environment to build for resilience? And finally, planet, I think we all agree that there's a strong link between space, health, the economy, justice, and well-being overall. And the pandemic has really made this clear. So we have seen at the same time great disparity unfolding, as well as amazing examples of ingenuity, of resilience, and innovation. So how do we frame our work in this broader perspective to make it really count? I see that there's a message. I just want to check that you can hear me. Sorry, Umbretta, but okay, nothing. So why a session dedicated to the young urbanists? Well, they are the future of our profession. So we want them to talk about what they expect and what they would like to be called on to address in their profession. And what do they need from the experiences that we heard from today and in the past few weeks that they might help them in their future? So a quick recap on the format of this session. The young urbanists will be given 2 minutes each to present themselves and talk about their background, their interest, and their ideas and their view in relationship to the academy, but also to the profession in general. They really have exciting profiles, they're passionate, they have ideas, and they have enthusiasm and energy. After that, for 10 minutes, the young urbanists will ask one icebreaker question, and they will have a minute each. And then they will each ask one question that is more in tune and perhaps more in line with their experience so far. After that, we would ask all of you to come up with a number of questions, if you can think of them, and if you can write them in the chat. So myself and Olga can record them and read them out for the young urbanists to answer them. And we'll have 12 minutes dedicated to that. Anything that doesn't get picked up today or answered, I think Olga will collate and then post on the Academy of Urbanism website. So having said that, and this is really just an overview, I want to introduce you to the young urbanist. So we have 4 of them today. We have Sean Vincent Kelly, who is Senior Project Officer at Glasgow City Council. We have Florian Ortega, who's Manager and Adaptation Lead for Cities and Regions at the Carbon Trust. We have Simeon Shebunaif, who's doctoral researcher. You've heard him before at Birmingham City University. And finally, we have Roxana Zvlacheva, who's Global Lead at Connected Places Catapult. So having said this, I'm gonna leave the 2 minutes to Sean, and then Florian, Simeon, and Roxana. Thank you.
Thanks, Umbretta, and thank you to the Academy for inviting me along today to talk a little bit about this. I've been a young urbanist for a few years, but somewhat ironically, we have become much more involved since the pandemic, despite all the restrictions. And I think that's partly because of the great online offer that the Academy managed to kind of put itself at the forefront of during the pandemic. And I'm also now the co-chair of a recently established Scottish advisory group, along with my colleague Heather Claridge. So yeah, I've become a lot more involved in the Academy, and I've really enjoyed doing that. A bit about myself. I'm a chartered urban planner, and I currently work at Glasgow City Council, as Bretta said, where my current role involves working with international partners to embed a nature-based solutions approach within the city's recently adopted open space strategy. In the past, I've concentrated my studies on development issues of the Global South, and I've been part of a team that looked at urban design issues in favelas in South America, and I spent some time out there working there. I've also practiced both in England and Scotland, and I've worked in both the public and private sectors so far. Today, I was quite keen to be involved in the panel discussion because I obviously consider that the three themes of people, place, and resilience to be rather pertinent to our current situation, especially in relation to a post-COVID recovery, climate change, and the societal inequalities that we face. These themes are all closely related to my own personal interests and my day-to-day professional activities, where my role involves creating more resilient communities by helping to create better conditions for renaturing cities, especially with a focus on citizen co-production. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sean. So we have, you actually have 20 seconds to spare, so you're super efficient. So we have Florian now, who is our second young urbanist. Florian.
I'm happy to take your 20 seconds, Shen, because I'm really talkative. So yes, I'm Florian Ortega. I'm a manager in the Cities and Regions team at the Common Trust. And I'm a planner by background, but it's been a few years that I sort of like left the planning field to work fully on climate change. I've been a young urbanist since 2014. And since I'm a young urbanist, I think I've taken part in all the possible schemes and that are offered by the young urbanists. So I've benefited from the mentoring scheme, both as a mentor and as a mentee. I've been awarded last year from the small grant scheme, and I've done some research on the climate emergency in the UK. So I really recommend you guys apply for this Young Urbanist Small Grant Scheme, which has just been launched this week. So I really did use and benefit quite a lot from the Young Urbanist Network, which is absolutely great from a networking, professional, and also social point of view. So on my side, I started my career in international development. I worked in Mexico, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Vietnam on a wide range of projects, from transport planning to water supply, wastewater management. And I realized a few years ago while I was working on the metro of Hanoi that I wanted something different for my career. So I sort of changed gear and I decided to work only on UK projects, starting to work in the local economic development sector. And now, since I joined the Common Trust for 2.5 years, I'm helping local authorities throughout the UK to cut their carbon emissions and to be more resilient to the adverse climate change risk. That was me.
Thank you, Florian, very much. We now have Simeon.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to see that people didn't scare away from my introduction and they've actually hung about. My name is Simeon Stebunayev. I am a doctoral researcher at the moment in Birmingham City University. And my project, also my research area is in sort of young people's and teenagers specifically, perceptions and understanding of planning. Where I'm focusing particularly in future city visions, and I'm trying to understand how young people can actually participate in the planning of future cities. My background is in architecture and town planning. I graduated from Sheffield University and master's in that. And I've been really kind of interested in education as well. So I've been teaching a lot and co-founded a summer school for architecture and design in Bulgaria in the past 5 years. I kind of went to a different way. I looked at the 3 topics and I just thought kind of like bring the top bits that I find really interesting for me. In terms of people, All of my sort of career in the past has been interested about tipping those power structures between younger people and older people, or like, you know, established people. Let's not talk about age, but maybe early career professionals. When I was part of the RIBA as a vice president there, I co-founded the Future Architects Initiative, and this was very much about kind of giving early career professionals a voice. And I think on the planet side, I think this is really important for me. I think the key idea is to move to a post-anthropocentric mindset, so something beyond just the human as a center. And I really just wanted to kind of set the tone in for where I come from by quoting one of my favorite authors. And this is basically what my PhD started from. But if you've read the work of Ursula Le Guin, and any of sort of academic or fictional work, in one of her papers, she talks about kind of criticizing, well, technically criticizing every Marxists and neo-Marxists, but looking at how people tend to boil down everything to political economic terms, whereas we should be really talking about the experiential and the cultural side. And she, in my experience, interviewing younger people and working with younger people, plants and animals are the things that people actually care at that age range in cities a lot more than anything else. And Ursula Le Guin goes, the fields and forests, the villages and byroads once did belong to us when we belonged to them. That is the truth of the non-industrial setting of so much fantasy. It reminds us of what we have denied, what we have exiled ourselves from. And I think it's really interesting when you talk about urbanism. You know, we tend to talk about the built environment a lot, but maybe not so much about how we actually interact with it. So this is me. I think I went more than 2 minutes, but sorry.
No, you're perfect and you're too efficient. We are 15 seconds ahead of time. And so I'm inviting now the last young urbanist, who is Roxana, please.
Thank you, Umbretta. Yes, my name is Roxana Slavcheva. I am currently the global lead at Connected Places Catapult, which is formerly known to a lot of you as Future Cities Catapult and Transport Systems Catapult. And my work currently focuses specifically on net zero urban innovation strategies in cities around the world. So I previously was also head of city practices at the Economist Intelligence Unit and a researcher at LSE Cities, always on global, international kind of city strategies and climate resilience. And I've been on the Young Urbanist Steering Committee actually since 2017. So if you have any specific questions about any of the schemes that our Young Urbanists mentioned, you can address them to me and Olga. And then in terms of what drew me to this panel, so as I mentioned at The Economist, I was the head of city practices and the editor of a worldwide cost of living and livability survey. And it just really fascinated me to note the disparity between the public perception of what makes a place more or less livable. So for example, safety concerns, low crime levels, the availability of globally known international sporting events, the fame, the attractions of the cities, the tourist kind of angle to it, compared to what communities value the most, which can be quite different. So for example, everything that has been discussed today, from the availability and access to green space, inclusivity, walkable neighborhoods, good transport links, affordability. So this kind of led me to join the Academy and specifically this panel as well to learn from my fellow panelists and all the participants as well. So looking forward to all of your great questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You have a really impressive CV. And I'm really glad that you actually joined this panel. Now, as I said before, the idea is that we put together a list of questions with the help of the leads and Olga for our young urbanist. And we're going to start with an icebreaker. Now, we'll keep an eye on the chat. The more questions we have, the fewer questions from our repertoire we're going to ask. So keep them coming, and don't worry, we've got a long list here. So, but we really very much would appreciate to hear questions from you. So I'm starting with my icebreaker, and as we said before, each young urbanist has got a minute. So I'll try and be fast, and you're just really asked to offer a snapshot of an answer. So here we go. We've seen from the 5 categories that the aspirations, ideas, and strategies to deliver excellent places and effective change exist and that are shared. We as a profession want and we can imagine quality. People want, celebrate, but most of all thrive in quality environments. So there is both courage and commitment, as Alistair said earlier on. But all categories that we've heard in the past weeks have raised the issue of gentrification and exclusion as a possible consequence of success. They have done so expressing concerns and through different examples. So the question, how can we ensure that quality is extended and enjoyed by all in the long run? In other words, how can we make quality inclusive and resilient? Sean, do you want to start? It's a difficult one.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one, actually. I mean, gentrification is obviously a huge problem anywhere that regeneration takes place. And I mean, from my own experience, I think that it helps if you have the community on board to begin with when you embark on any regeneration plans in the local area. But I also think that we can't be afraid of market intervention, really, because I think that if we just let the private sector, lead and take control of regeneration of our cities and towns, then ultimately one of the consequences of that is gentrification. People then are pushed out and can't afford to live in the places where they may have grown up. So market intervention isn't always a scary thing. It sometimes is. In the UK, we focus on neoliberal economics, and that's kind of what guides us through. But we do have some market intervention in the property market, for example, but sometimes it's not always embraced as much as it possibly could be. So I think that more market intervention into how we develop our towns and cities would go a far way to prevent some of the negative consequences of gentrification. Also, when you're bringing your communities on board, you need to make sure that you're engaging with a broad range of audiences too, so that people feel that they belong and that they feel that they really are contributing to the changes that are taking place, not just that they can then afford to continue on living there. So it's a huge issue. I don't have all the answers, but hopefully other people might have more to add.
Perfect, thank you, Sean. Do we have Florian that wants to chip in, maybe? You're muted.
Yes. Do you want to rephrase the question?
It is the same question. It's the same question for everybody. So how can we ensure that quality is extended to and enjoyed by all in the long run? So how can we make quality inclusive and resilient?
A very, very tricky one, because I think there's often an inverse correlation between quality and how you can make this quality accessible to everyone. I think, I guess from a sort of like, from my point of view, and I work mostly in the climate change sector, I do think there is a question of scaling up. I think there is lots of economies of scale that you can achieve at a higher up and more strategic level than the one we usually worked in. So for example, local authorities level, to make accessible some key infrastructures to everyone and not to the sort of like local areas you're working in. So for me, the scale is really like a very critical component of how to make this quality and sort of inclusiveness work together better.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Simeo and Roxana, do you want to add one point?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go.
Yes, I remembered a quote from Marisa Lago, who is, I believe, the chair of the City Planning Commission at New York City. So I attended a talk by her probably a year ago, and this quote really stuck with me. So she said that reversing gentrification is easy. You just have to let the crime rates go up. So we know also through my research on livability that safety is paramount for lively neighborhoods. But the real issue, as we talked about now, is how to best address economic inequality, which is really what is causing gentrification, moving the problem around. So I think we should be focusing on inequality when we discuss this issue most. And there are several policy tools that are coming across in the comments in the chat, actually. And other things we haven't discussed are rent controls and also universal basic income. So this is, of course, not just an economic discussion, but I think we need to start from there.
Excellent. Wonderful. Simeon, would you like a final thought on this, since your concern are people and experiences?
I have a lot to talk about on this, I think, but from my experience, I think it's, I'm going maybe go on a limb here and just say it's really surprising that we don't plan for it when we actually start regeneration processes or sort of improvement processes. I mean, it's not a phenomenon that has started, appeared relatively recently. We've been aware about gentrification and displacement from big regeneration projects in cities for quite a while. And actually, no project actually goes on, sets out and says what would happen to the community that lives here already. I mean, very few actually do that, and especially in a meaningful way. I mean, keeping the New York team, if you look at Sharon Zukin's work in New York and just how she thinks about people's right to stay in the places and occupy the places where they are in. I think for me, it's just surprising that no large-scale processes actually go out and say, look, we will work with you from the beginning and we would actually try and retain you as a community, as residents in this area. So it's just, we don't plan for it. We don't put it as a priority.
Sean.
I just wanted to have a really quick comment on that. And I actually think that from my perspective as a planning professional, that more often than not, we do go out with the best intentions at the beginning of a regeneration project, but actually there are a whole range of stakeholders who might have a bigger say. For example, there may be local councillors, for example, that might have interest in particular areas that mean that they might not necessarily agree with taking a kind of a citizen people first approach. And also it's different depending on the context of where you are. So I lived in London for a few years, and regeneration projects in London are a whole different beast to what they are in Glasgow, where I currently now live, where arguably the inequalities are not as great but still exist. So that was my final 2 points. Sorry.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think this first quick round has really showed everybody that we have a fantastic group here that not only are exciting, but they're also wise, which is encouraging and frightening at the same time. Now, I'm very glad because I can see that there are really good and several questions that are coming up. So I'm gonna turn things around and make a suggestion that we'll let the people that have contributed questions the chance to ask them first, and then if we do have time, we can go back to the reserve list of questions that we did have, because we are more prepared on those, and it's easier perhaps to put them online. And I'm going to consult quickly with my 4 experts if you're comfortable to do so. And if so, I would almost ask David Lam if he wants to read out his question, or I can do so. Sean, Roxana, Simeon, Florian, are you comfortable? Or we stick to the script? You're comfortable. Excellent.
Give it a go.
So, okay. So David Lam, are you around or
Yes,
not?
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Welcome.
Well, I've actually put 2 questions down. Shall I take the first one first and see how we get on?
Yes.
That you could say these are political questions, which I don't really want to get into, but they are meant to be a little bit provocative and topical. The government has issued an intention for a green industrial revolution, but they're linking it to creation of jobs, which, if you like, is a little bit worrying, because I think someone's mentioned already that we need to think about health and wealth rather than the gross national product and our jobs issue when we look at the global issue, the planet. And really behind my question is, I'm very interested in what the young urbanists think about devolution in this country. I don't know whether they've experienced it through their various studies and involvements, but there is a desperate need to get what they have in Aarhus in this country, where the citizens already think they're part of the process at the neighbourhood community level. Because, for instance, in Aarhus, they have 34 citizens' councils, and each one in a neighbourhood, and they're manned by and womaned by members of the council, as well as officers of the council, as well as leaders of the community. So there's an equal democratic level of dialogue involved in everything that happens in the city. It's something we're still aspiring to here, despite the Localism Act, which was enacted 2011 to try and devolve active involvement down to the communities. So really the question is, do cities have a plan? Do you think cities should have a plan to respond to the need to reverse climate change and at the same time stimulate economic growth?
I wonder if Florian wants to start on this. You're muted, Florian.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I was going to say I can take this one. Thanks a lot for the question. That's really interesting, very linked to what I'm doing at the Carbon Trust as well, and very linked to some interests I have and following the news. I think, yes, local authorities should have a plan both to address climate change and to create jobs. I think if your question has been around what's the mandate in terms of GVA creation, so producing more economic outputs and at the same time reversing climate change, I would have struggled more to see how this can be combined. But I'm actually working in Wales, where you do have lots of wind, so lots of like potential for onshore, offshore wind farm, and this is quite a big sort of like strategic focus for the UK to become like a leader in wind energy, basically. And we're like calculating what's the potential of job creation for different regions in Wales. So it's not only for the wind energy, but also the EV supply chain. So the Welsh government is quite ambitious with the target. They have been set a target by the Committee on Climate Change that they want to actually beat, and they want to beat it to also create jobs in areas of world that are quite deprived and that really need this green stimulus.
Excellent. Would Simeon, Roxana, or Sean want to add something? Or if yes, Sean, you go ahead, and then I think we can take maybe one more question, because Olga just told me that we'll stop at 17:25, so we have 7 minutes. Okay,
I'll be really quick. Thanks for the question, David. I think on the questions at devolution and should power be transferred to a more local level, I think absolutely. But it's how that is facilitated, I suppose, is a big question. In England, there's neighbourhood planning, and whilst there's lots of benefits to that, there's huge issues around it as well. And in Scotland, we're just about to follow down a similar route with local place plans. Great idea in theory, and I'm really hoping that we can make them work. But I think that local authorities should have the power to be able to transfer the power to citizens, actually, but in a facilitated way and in more of a partnership sort of way. And we're working on ways of doing that in Glasgow City Council at the moment. And in relation to the green revolution and jobs, I think that also needs to come from a bottom-up approach. And in Glasgow, at the moment, we're working on creating a nature-based enterprise business incubator, which would be the first in Scotland. It's at an early stage just now, but it would be at a very local plot level at this point. So some good stuff happening, is what I would say. But I do agree that devolution definitely needs to be a process that we should follow through to a very local level.
Excellent.
Right.
Oh, David, yes. Rosanna and Simeon, if you don't mind, maybe I'm going to ask you to focus on the next question. And I'm looking at the question from Stuart Turner. Stuart, do you want to come in, or I'll read your question for everybody? I'll read the question.
Hello. Yeah.
Oh, here's Stuart. Stuart, here you go. No, you go.
Just very quickly. I try to make it simple, but of course it is a loaded question. This question of developing visions and future strategies for our cities here in the UK, Europe, and globally, I suspect, over a significant period of time. Milton Keynes is one example. They had a strategy which they published at the beginning of this year in January for a 30-year period, and they've already revised that and come up with a new one over that period of time. Really, my question to the panel is it realistic to develop strategies over this period of time? And if so, how would they approach it? And really, I'm getting at the question of is really getting at the rate of change, environmental change, technological change, lifestyle changes, living and working styles. It just goes on. But just, I'll leave it there.
It's a wonderful question. So who's, is it Roxanne or Florian?
I'll try to tackle it first, but I'm sure Florian will have some great ideas to add on as well. I think, is it realistic? I think it depends on how you approach it. If you approach a strategy, a 30-year strategy, with the goal in mind, or with the kind of idea in mind that we're going to be living in a very different world from today, then it is possible. It's going to be most likely a 2-degree warmer world. So you will have to factor in, what that means. So of course, there's going to be assumptions going into no matter what plan you decide to create. But I think that it is definitely possible and definitely should be done. There should be a plan and a vision for how the city sees itself in 30 to 50 years, with all of the assumptions of climate change, and as you mentioned, technologies, and the future of work and movement. And that plan is set to be revised every few years or so. It is not set in stone. It is a vision. It is a guide. And it allows, obviously the kind of government entities of the city, but it allows people to see whether it's a vision that they can buy into.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roxana. Simeon, do you want to add something? Yes, I heard you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is, I think, this is at the core of what I would want to work in the future. And for all its faults, I think in the white paper the government published, this was the bit that I thought has the most potential to be taken further. I would say it's not realistic. 30 years in the future, setting a plan with all the technical and policy details inside, in my view, it's a sort of a bit of an obsolete way of doing it. I think if you want the vision, you want the desire and the sort of the imagination set out for that time period, but the actual technical policies and the actual, sort of the day-to-day, how you actually plan the city, that should be almost a live thing. Every policy should be reviewed all the time, and we have that capability at the moment. You could feed that information straight away. It's just we have to change the way we actually operate as planners and as sort of city planners. I think that the idea of having digital passports on buildings, of having linking licensing system with the planning system, having data-based approach in planning, for me is very appealing. And I think on a technical level, that should be the case. On a visionary level, we should have the goals and the aims set out, and that should be sort of the democratic process. But I would say no, it's not realistic. And as you said, they've published and they've already revised it. I think it's just a waste of time most of the time, and it's not actually really consulting a lot of people in a meaningful way anyway.
That's an interesting and a controversial view. If I can add one word, and maybe this is not my position, but I think it's very important. I mean, we're talking about resilience here, and it's very important perhaps that we do learn in this field what other disciplines and subjects are and know in terms of resilience, because there are disciplines that are much more advanced than planning and urban design and architecture are in this definition. Ecological systems, complex systems, they know more and they've used it more. So perhaps that's a starting point from which we could consider and then learn to plan better for resilience. I see, sorry, Stuart.
I was just going to say, could I thank you for those answers? That's lovely. And I'd love to carry on the conversation with Roxana at some time. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Now, I know that it's 17:25 and I've got Olga that is looking at me like a hawk. But if I can point everybody to the chat line, there's a follow-up question from Cathal, which is really interesting, about devolution. And perhaps it would be worth adding one final thought. I don't know if Roxana maybe wants to take this on. And the question from Cathal was, is there a chance that devolution to local authorities could lead to poorer areas staying poor, as their budget is likely to be reflective of their local income? If somebody wants to pick this up. There's been a further discussion following on, and this seems to be a thread that people are enjoying. Roxana?
Sure, I will definitely try to tackle it, although it's not necessarily kind of my area of expertise. There is always a risk. I mean, I will try to keep it broad, but yes, there is unfortunately a risk to being stuck in particular kind of models or particular ways of working and particular ways of allocating budgets based on certain assumptions. But I'm hoping that is definitely changing, and there are other criteria that is taken into consideration. But with everything, this is also kind of turning more political, but as with everything, it's not just about the vision, as we discussed, and the plan, but it is also about how it is being executed. So I'll just leave it.
Wonderful. And I think I'm looking at the comments, and it seems that everybody has really appreciated and enjoyed your points of view, which it's a fantastic sign, because it means that you're the future generation. So things are going to look up, and we're going to find the good ways to move on and to really contribute as best as we can. At this point, I'm going to really close this panel session. Thank everybody for the young urbanists, first of all, for really being wonderful, being enthusiastic, and just giving their best shot to really difficult and interesting answers. And to the Academy for hosting this session. Thank you. I know that there's going to be a closing moment now, so I'm going to leave the stage.
Okay. Thank you very much, Umbretta, and also Simeon, Sean, Roxana, and Florian. I think you'd agree with me when I say that, having heard our young urbanist contribution, we can all feel that the future is in safe hands. The wisdom they've shown today in their presentations was really remarkable. I hope you found the Awards Revisited celebration as interesting as I did. The opportunity to, the process of revisiting the cities, towns, neighbourhoods, streets and places that the AoU has identified as exemplars of good urbanism, and how these are continuing to find inspirational ways to respond to changed circumstances has been fascinating. And that process can make us feel confident about the post-COVID future. I think there have been many changes that have occurred in society, in cities and towns, that won't be forgotten. I think that's paralleled very much in the Academy, in that our normal activities, as would have been planned for this year, our Congress, our awards events such as this, were very much events where people gather together. That opportunity has been lost in this year, but it has led to us finding new ways of communicating with members. And that in its own way has has identified new possibilities for us in the future in terms of internationalization of speakers. We can now reach a much wider audience of speakers, where before we had to think carefully about somebody coming from abroad. And separately, it's been a huge boost to our regions and nations membership, where people who normally couldn't get to London very often or get to events in big cities can now participate more generally. So those things won't be forgotten, in the same way as the better changes that have occurred in our cities and towns won't be forgotten. After that short diatribe, I'd like to just, it falls to me to thank all of the participants for taking part in the awards process over the last number of months. And I'd also like to thank all those who joined our awards lunches and also today's award celebration, and all the colleagues involved in the process in each of the cities, towns and places supporting the entire event. I'd also like to thank all of the lead and deputy assessors for each of the categories. I'd especially like to thank Ian Macmillan. Having to read 15 sonnets in one session is quite a task and quite an ask of anyone, even Ian Macmillan. I'd like to thank our award sponsors, JTP, Savills and Grosvenor, and also again to thank our AoU general sponsors. And finally, I'd like to thank both the AoU team and most of all of our members. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I just want to, while I have everyone's attention, flag up a couple of upcoming events, if you don't mind. I put this slide up at the start, but please visit our website to see what we have coming up before the end of the year and into the early new year. There'll be our annual review of the Urbanism Awards, just to see what the process is looking at for next year. That'll be on the 26th of January. All of our members are welcome to join that session. It'll be on the afternoon on Zoom, of course. And a big thank you, finally, as Tony mentioned, to the Academy's sponsors. And that about wraps it up. So thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.